That's
Good evening, everyone. This is Chris Sevney, co-host of the Good Deeds No Investing podcast, here with the ever educational Gail Anthony Greenberg. Gail, how are you today?
very well. Thank you, Chris. Great to be with you.
Are you signing a check over to me right now?
I am. I gave you so much money this week. I am never giving you another penny.
Aren't I the one that wired you 25 grand?
Well, all right.
So welcome everyone to this edition of the open mic night of the podcast. And before we get going and taking questions from people, we'll start off with a what just happened. And I'll start off first, Gail, with something that I just happened literally 15 minutes ago, where I got an email from the servicer. I had a note boarded last month. It was actually a contract for deed from John Keith. And I acquired the CFD for about $9,000. Had a UPB of about $19,000, and the borrower had made like 10 out of 12 payments in the last 12 months. So it's really on the borderline performing, semi-performing. And the minute it got boarded, the borrower called in and wanted to do a short payoff of $12,000. And basically I was like, no thanks. But I countered with a counter at $17,000. And I got an email today basically saying that the guy, appears to have accepted the short payoff, which would be great. But the reason I bring this up for the people who are watching too is, in any business, especially in this business, don't count your chickens before they hatch type of thing. So, I'm not going to go to like my JV partner all excited. It's like, ooh, we're getting a short payoff, because it's when you've been in this business long enough, you realize that people say a lot of things that they never come through with. I've had borrowers who keep saying that they are going to be making that payment today, but their father died. It's the same father who died 8 months ago. So it's interesting how that happens. But so it's good that this may happen. But before people sometimes get too excited over things, sometimes you just got to sit back and let it play out to see how it ends up happening.
Yeah, it's consistent with the theme of under-promising and over-delivering. Like, never report a rumor like that to a JV and get them excited. It's hard enough managing your own expectations so you don't feel disappointed when things don't happen. I try to just be very accepting of whatever happens and feel that there will be some good result in the end, but it's not always easy.
No, it's similar like you with your recent acquisition. I know you were, waiting, on the edge of your seat, hoping for something good to occur, which it did, but I know you're also keeping that kind of close to the vest.
I know. I literally spent 5 months not saying anything to anyone. It's like being pregnant. Yeah, it was really, really hard, because people even would ask, they knew that it was a dream of mine, and they would ask me, once in a while, hey, whatever happened with that? And I'm like, I don't know. But that's what just happened. I am right now, renovating a house, and at a great distance. And unlike the usual CFDs, where it's not that important whether they get every detail right, this is very important.
I'm sorry, I'm laughing because the dog in the background with the ear sticking out looks like it's photo bombing this webinar for those who are on watching it. It's
I just have to say too, from people who have written to me at my gail@gooddeedsnoteinvesting.com email address, like, I thought I was getting the email from that, but I found out today I wasn't. And when I got it, there was an avalanche, and one person said some unkind things about my dogs. So you're out. Now, we thought 2 weeks ago my dog had terminal cancer, so now we're especially sensitive about any unkind remarks about the dogs. I'm just going to say, for everyone's benefit, the dog is staying. You have to deal with it.
The husband's still questionable, but the dog is definitely staying.
Yeah, he's actually in the dog house, but the dog is in the main house.
Good.
So actually my renovating a house and caring a lot about how it turns out. This just really reminds me why it's so great to be in the note business, and where, you know, the stakes are lower and the disappointments are not as great. The contractor just showed me like the long pieces that are holding the wooden house up off the ground, and they're literally shredded from years of termites gnawing away. These are like massive pieces. They're almost like telephone poles, and they've just been like complete. I don't even know how this house is still standing up. It's crazy. Everything, it's kind of hovering in the air over the.
You sure you don't want the fire department just come burn it down for you? Save you a few bucks on the demo and start from scratch?
It literally will be like a completely new house. Like they're replacing each piece at a time, but it will all be new eventually. But it's still cheaper to do that than do new construction because of like all the planning, you know, the architectural and, you know, all the plans that would be required. Like you engineers like Chad and you know all about that. Yeah, just like someone told me they put a container house in this city where literally all they were doing was, you know, creating footings and then sliding a container house onto it.
Yep.
They had $25,000 in architectural and like city required plans. So
yeah,
okay, there's the dog.
Yeah, when we built our house, the architect I hired was only $7,500, mostly because we already had the plans and not an architect, but we knew what we wanted, and it was more just putting plans together for a stamp. So yeah, it can get big. You know, soft costs and construction are very expensive. So it's not just the cost to build it, but all the ancillary costs that you have.
Right.
Okay, with that being said, why don't we roll into our main segment of the episode tonight? And as always, we typically do not have a main topic to discuss. We leave it up to you, the listeners out there. So if anyone has a topic they want to have us discuss or have any questions for us, please put in the chat or raise your hand. Not everyone always go at once, like always.
Yes, there must be a reason that you came.
Okay, let's see.
Chad.
I'm going to bring on Mr. Urbshott. Hey, Chad.
Hey, guys. How you doing?
Good. How are you?
Good, good. Long time no text.
Yes, it is.
A day without Chad. It's
yes.
not a good one.
And Chad, if you want to, for the listeners, give a brief description about you, your business, what you do, stuff, you're more than happy to.
Okay, sure. So I have known you guys for probably a year now or more.
Probably a little over a year, yep.
Around that time, we were somewhat disciples of the Scott Carson We Close Notes crew, I guess. I started into notes about 3-4 years ago with, I started as a passive investor and somewhat switched over full-time into it about a year and a half ago, I guess. Prior to that, I've been a real estate investor for about a dozen years, started with rentals, lease options, student apartments. Gail, you've got quite the experience with that. In the animal houses, as I used to call them. Mine housed 12 apiece, so you can imagine how it was.
Zoo. Zoo animals in the zoo.
Yeah, exactly. And then I've got very similar background as Chris, as probably many of the listeners are aware. I'm a structural engineer. I work for developers, so him and I have a fairly similar path in life. So I've actually developed some properties, my own commercial properties. But like I said, about a year and a half ago, I delved into the note business about full time. And I'm happily still at it most days until I am going to share with you my horror story. I'm hoping someone can shed some light on how I should or might handle this. So.
Mm-hmm. Okay, good.
Intrigued.
Yep.
Go on.
All right. So this is probably not one of the worst properties I've ever dealt with, but pretty high up there, I'd say, in the top 5, if not top 3. So this is a property. I'm not going to mention where it is because it's still very hot and live, and don't want to give away just in case this ever will or might go to court.
Yeah. Smart. Yes.
I'll just say it's in the state of Missouri, our favorite state, Gail.
Oh, yes. I fled a long time.
Yeah. No, I've had some good luck there. Mostly good luck. Just a few hookups here and there, but so in any event, this is a note that I actually bought out of a partnership that I started out with, and it was a reperformer, kind of like a semi-reperforming note, mostly reperforming. I can't remember the exact. I'd say the percentage UPB is probably around 70, low 70s. I think picked it up for, and it was about 60% of the value of the property. Fast forward, probably 6 months into it, stops paying, arguing about the taxes going up and his payment changing by like $25 a month. So we stopped paying, and I was like, well, you can't do anything about it, it's the taxes. And he said, well, no, my contract says I pay this amount. In any event, that was
the same thing.
What's that?
I have the same issue with a guy right now. Same issue.
Oh, do you? Yeah. So in any event, he decided to stop paying. Didn't, that was basically it. He was just dug his heels in, and that was it. So 3 months later, it's a CFD. Let's go for forfeiture. So forfeiture happens, it takes 3-4 months kind of thing. Still on the property. Obviously, he's not willing to budge. In any event, we get the forfeiture, and the day of the eviction, I get a local ground crew to go and have the locks changed and investigate the property, what have you. While they're there, he calls me and he said, and so he's a local property manager in this area this property's in. And he says, back in the recession, he used to do like about 50 a month, 50 evictions and turning properties over, and he still does a lot because he's a property manager. He said this is the absolute worst property he's ever seen. As he's on the phone with me, he's gagging and like almost vomiting. So it was that bad. Just because.
Oh my God. Was it like odor or really disgusting mess or
everything? Yeah, the odor.
Some details.
Well,
the color.
Apparently there was quite a few animals in the place,
Yeah.
and they weren't cleaned up. And I think they were actually living like they were with the animals as well, because there was also that other type of matter in the property. In any event.
So the borrower was actually living that way?
Yes.
Oh my God. Okay.
Yeah. Sorry, this might completely take over your entire show by the time I get done the story. But,
it's okay.
I was gonna post this on one of those horror story Facebook groups, but this is gonna take way too long to type out. So I'm telling you now. So I'm looking for advice at the end of this. Just so just bear with me. So no one was there when they get there with the sheriff, and property is vacant, or not vacant, just no one was there, but it was full to the brim. They weren't exactly hoarders, but there was quite the mess left behind. So while he calls me, he said, "Do you want this place trashed out?" And I said, "Well, yes, please." And he sends me some pictures. So the next day I get the pictures, and the very last one had a red sign on the door, and it was ripped in half. But as I'm zooming in on it, I'm like, oh my gosh, this is one of those dangerous or unsafe for occupancy signs. I kind of like trying to read one half and put the other half together. I'm like, oh, this place has been condemned by the city, and that's fantastic. So there was the inspector's name was on there. Call the city. No response. Google the city, find the guy's name, find his email him. No response. A week later, I finally get a response back saying that yes, indeed, they had put an unsafe for occupancy sign on the property. I won't get into too many details, but they basically, like I said, this one might go to court, so I can't give away too many details, but they basically shut it down because of the living conditions. And him and his mother living there, and a call was made, a welfare call was made to go in and check up on her. And when paramedics or whoever arrived, they called the police because the place was in such a disaster. Then the police in turn called the city. The city goes inspects it. They shut it down. They then proceed to turn the electricity off, power off, because when they forced these people to leave, they kept going back in. Mm-hmm. I was completely unaware of any of this going on until I see the sign on the property. So the guy that was going to clean it out, I said, well, yes, please, like, I talked to the city, or I said, please go down to the city, like, find out what that's all about, and let's get this place cleaned out. He goes down there and he said, oh, I need to have workman's comp, and he was licensed and bonded and everything, but just didn't have workman's comp. Apparently needed that with the city. So the last thing he says to me, he goes, well, good luck with this. You're going to get nailed to the wall with people that are licensed by the city because they can charge you whatever they want. And I'm like, yeah, I've been down this road before. Any event, I hire an REO agent that's very familiar with dealing with Fannie Mae properties and what have you. Mm-hmm. That person gets the contractor lined up to go in to clean it out. And I said, well, whatever you do, you need to go down and get a permit from the city to go into this property. Yes. We've been down this road before. I mean, we're aware of that. They get the, so I understand they get the permit. They give me a quote, and I almost fell off my chair. Like, I was just completely shocked about how much they charged. And I actually sent in a couple other people to have give me a quote back, and they understood the the predicament with the city. So they said, yeah, we're not going to touch this. I'm like, okay, great. So end up hiring the first crew to clean it out, or the crew that this REO agent hired. Mm-hmm. This was a couple weeks ago. So then they said, okay, the next step is we need to get the air ducts cleaned. That's a requirement of the city because the smell and what have you. Mm-hmm. And we need to get the electricity turned back on. Fine. I call the power company. They called me back the next day saying that the city has put a moratorium on the property because the meter was yanked and they need to get the blessing from the city. I'm like, okay. Called the guy from the city or emailed him. He never responds. Can we get this back on? I get this blast of an email a couple days ago saying that this contracting company went in without their permission and without a permit to clean this property out. And now he is, so he's basically a guy on a power trip. Mm-hmm. And like just going off on the deep end, how he is taking everybody into court that entered this property illegally. We're never going to get the power turned on until all this is resolved. And, he's not giving any instructions on what he needs done. But anyway, so I'm kind of
sorry, Chad, who was it who sent that email to you?
The inspector from the city. So, okay. One of the buildings.
So he's like really watching this place now.
Yeah, this place has got a total stigma attached to it. It's, it's definitely.
He's sitting outside drinking coffee and waiting for you to do something wrong.
Pretty much, yes. Yeah. So anyway, I just thrown that story out there. I'm just wondering if any of you, the two of you, have ever dealt in such a situation, or any of your listeners might be able to pipe in and see how I should deal with this, because I'm at wit's end with this guy from the city. I'm tempted to fly down to this particular area and have it out with him. He's one of these guys that hides behind emails and won't pick up the phone. I called him like 16 times today, and he would not answer his phone. So,
out of curiosity, how much you went to it? 10 to 20 grand, 20 to 30 grand?
25 to 30, yeah, somewhere in that area.
So I had similar story in the wonderful state of Ohio, where I had you've seen some of these pictures with the water and stuff in the basement that I sent to you.
Yeah.
So this guy, similar, moved next door, and when I kept sending preservation companies over there, he'd come out across the street and say, I own this property, you can't come in. He finally let us get in, and then when he did, the neighbor was the former like deputy of the water department. Mm. So we first went to go pump the water out, and we were just pumping it in the yard, and he said, you can't do that. So he called the city. The city came out, basically threatened to fine me, and then said I had to run a hose 200 feet down the street to discharge it into a storm drain. So, basically my guy, he said, you don't need a permit though. So my guy goes, gets, the fire hose, 200 feet of it, and, with a, decent pump, and starts pumping it. The guy calls again to the city. The city comes out, shuts them down again, saying you're not supposed to pump there. You're supposed to pump to the storm drain in front of the property, which, I was on the phone with the guy. I said, why would I hire a guy to run a line 200 feet when there's one he could have done on 20 feet? But long story short is, that took about 4 months to work through. And
Wow.
Finally, what ended up happening is I was getting quotes for mold removal and everything, because the house was just completely filled with mold at that point in time. And I was getting quotes of 10, 15, 20, 20,000. And I could have had a guy renovate the property and do everything. And if I would have, I probably would have broke about even, or, maybe even made a few bucks. But what I ended up doing is, honestly, I just bit the bullet and sold it to a guy. The guy who's going to do the mold knew somebody who might be interested in it. And so I ended up selling it to him at a loss. So it was one of those things where it was, for me, the time and effort I would have had to take. And when I took into account how much time I had into this thing, it was just not worth it for me. Now each situation is different. Give you an idea, I was into that asset for right around about 30,000. And at the end of the day, I sold it for 25. So kind of give you an idea, but I don't know what this is worth or not, but that's my story in regards to that.
So if this were an episode of Ray Donovan, you would find out something about this guy that could make you kind of crush him and get him to cooperate with you. I can tell by your reaction, no one watches Ray Donovan.
No.
He's a fixer. He's a fixer. And, whatever happens, he can basically get leverage on people to make them do what he wants them to do.
Well, it's funny you say that. Oh, sorry, I'll go on and I'll tell you.
I was going to say, since you're a nice Canadian fellow, you probably aren't going to do that anyway. But when you said you would go there, what I would personally do, and maybe it's because I'm a girl, I would first of all just try to find out sort of what this guy is all about, and what his deal is that he's so he behaves this way. Mm-hmm. And my guess is that probably going down there and having it out with him would probably not be, when someone's power tripping, you don't meet them with force, but just sort of appeal to him on the basis of, look, I am here in good faith trying to resolve a situation where you have this really toxic house, and, I'm doing my best to get it turned around so it's not a blight on the neighborhood, it's not a nuisance, not causing problems, can we work together on this?
Yeah, that's definitely a good approach.
Hey, Chad, is this in more metropolis, or is it in more rural area?
Well, there's
it's in the
Louis
metropolis
City and St. Louis County, right? Is it in the city?
So
it's actually neither. It's in the metropolis, but it's
yeah. So what I was thinking actually, Chad, was seeing if there was an investor Facebook group in the area, or post on there, hey, has anyone had any good dealings with, don't put the person's name, but anyone had any good dealings or no contractors that have good relationships with the county, because I'm having
the inspectors in the county. I actually have a friend I have a JV who's in Missouri and is the sweetest man. He might be somebody who could just kind of, go have a face-to-face with this guy and just sort of find out what it is, what is it that this guy really wants? It can't be to bankrupt you. I can't imagine that that's his end game, but, maybe he's not really recognizing that you can't really help the community if he is trying to bankrupt you. That's, I think sincerity and just really expressing what it is that you're, the fact that you're trying to deliver a benefit.
Right.
be like the only possibility. I mean, if he's just a total asshole, I guess. Then you have to find out what he, then that's when the bribery option becomes available.
Right.
What is your in-game chat, or what are your exit strategies? What are you thinking right now?
Well, the property's as is probably worth mid 40s. So, I'm not taking a loss on that. That's for sure.
Yeah, you got a little room.
Unless they keep tacking on all these. Well, in addition to that, I got a letter this week. Apparently, right before we evicted the guy, there was a bunch of junk in the yard that they sent in their own contractors and happily charged me $1,000 to remove some of it. Anyway.
Yeah. Well, in the era when it's so easy to email and text, like you kind of forget the power of like talking to people and
this guy won't pick up the phone though. He won't pick up the phone.
That is a problem.
Yeah.
Like, do you know anybody who knows him who could kind of broker a meeting or just like even a phone call?
I'm not sure. I'll have to.
Yeah, if you kind of ask around, I just scored, like I was complaining about a banker who wasn't getting back to me in like a pretty big city, and my attorney was like, oh, well, I know him and I know other bankers, so like I'm going to make a call for you right now. So
that's true.
Yeah, it's really valuable to just kind of tap into those networks.
A few comments.
Yeah, the one angle I do have on this particular person from the city is they did not actually notify me. And I looked up their ordinances they're supposed to actually notify the property owner by either letter or a couple other different means. They didn't notify me whatsoever. I didn't know anything about it until the original guy hired to clean it out went and saw the property, and I noticed the sign. So yeah, I definitely have an angle, I think. So I'm just wondering how and when I pull it out, or
yeah. So your fellow note investors are kind of agreeing that if this guy's really unreasonable, that you can go over his head, but again, suggesting do it in sort of a nice way. Like, I couldn't get in touch with you, so I just came. I thought I would just call someone else.
Right.
I would be careful with that because
risky.
When I worked on the general contracting side, and you'd have issues with inspectors and stuff, and if you ever had to go over their head, you're going over their head, and most of these inspectors are best buddies, and they're godfathers of the person you're probably talking with and stuff, and they'll be like, hey, this guy called me and so forth, and you just gotta be careful because they can also make your life even a more miserable living hell.
Chad, how big a town is this? Is it?
It's a pretty large metropolis. Yeah, it's let's put it this way: it's a suburb of a big metropolis. Okay.
Why wouldn't you just consider selling it as is?
As is, yeah.
Well, no one can. They won't allow anybody in there. That's the problem. So no one's allowed access to this place because it's condemned right now. So that is the problem. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, there might be investors in that area who've had experience with that.
Yeah, and it's funny you say that. I've actually had a couple yellow letters, or whatever you call them, sent to me, and I've got some interest.
All of them.
Yeah. Well, I've actually talked to them. But they're lowballing me. They want they're trying to give me half of what the property's worth. So it's like, yeah, no, I don't think so. I think we'll be listing this.
Okay.
Well, good luck.
All right.
Let us know. Come back and tell us.
We'll have you back on in a month or two to finalize it. The other thing too is, just last thing is try and, like I said, if you talk to some contractors, just see if they know of that inspector, have a relationship with them, and try and hire one that may know or have a relationship. But based on how it sounds, this guy probably doesn't have relationships with any contractors. And I hear his name, want to rip their hair out.
Right. Okay, no, that's good advice, guys. Appreciate that.
Thanks, Chad.
Hey, thanks a lot.
Hang in there. Yeah.
Okay.
Who's next?
Who wants to join on? We did have one question, we can answer in the meantime that popped through. That was, what's the biggest challenge facing new note investors, from Kevin?
Well, to hear them tell it, it's finding their first deal. And I don't know if it's finding the first deal or just feeling confident enough to do the first deal. And kind of be same feeling. Yeah, just jumping off the diving board, right? Like,
well, I think the other thing too is also not being afraid to ask somebody to just look at, something, whether it's a bid. I know someone on here tonight sent me an email saying, hey, I'm looking at these assets and I'm going to put a bid on it. And actually it's interesting because one of the questions from Casey came up, which if Casey wants to hop on, we can, because he asked a good question about the stair-step method. But, if you use people in this business as a resource and say, hey, do you have 5 minutes to hop on a call? I'm thinking of putting some bids in. Would you mind taking a look at it? And, if it's something that I was also bidding in, I tell you, hey, look, I'm bidding on that as well. But, a lot of this stuff that I get sent, I know who they're coming from, and I haven't bid those recently. So, I know I'm more than happy to help sometimes if I have the time. But, it's just people in that challenge of being afraid to ask people to assist and just double checking. I mean, people aren't going to do the work for you, but people typically don't mind just looking at something real quick and give you an idea of, that looks like it's in the ballpark.
Well, it's good that you said that, because I think a lot of people don't think that, a lot of people would be open to having a call like that or an email, because now, really, just in the time that we've been doing this, so many of our peers have gone into the education business, and now there's definitely a feeling like if you want an opinion, you're going to have to pay for it. But we're here every Thursday night, and yeah, we're available.
Yeah. So let's see. Oh, we got lots of. Okay, Casey said he's working, has lots of noise in the background, so I'll pose this question. Is when you have assets that have high UPBs of 50, 60,000, but monthly payments of only maybe 300 or 400 because they've been modified at 2 or 4 or 6% loans, can you use the stair-step method? And for those people who haven't heard the stair-step method before, it's used as an initial analysis for a rough ballpark of bidding of assets under $25,000. You bid roughly 25%. Assets 35,000 unless it's 35%. 45,000, 45%, 55,000, and vice versa. So
I just want to ask you, when is the last time you actually got something for,
the stair-step method?
That's a low percentage. I mean, $25,000 asset, that's not uncommon on contracts for deed. And like, have you really ever gotten, lately, have you gotten?
I was going to say, Gail, didn't we?
For 25% of UPB?
But yeah, well, it's also, used as kind of a calculation to give you an idea of where things may start. But to answer Casey's question, I would throw that out the door, because on those, especially if they're performing, if you take a $50,000 asset and you're going to pay 55 cents on the dollar, you're paying $27,500 for that thing. And if it's only netting you $300 a month, that's $3,600 a year. That's going to take you like 9 years to get your money back. And if you go by the rule of, I think it was a rule of 12, where basically, every 6 years you should be doubling your money to get 12%. It's that would not be a good return even on a performing loan. So that's one thing.
Yeah. The standard rule was like you want your money back in 4 years, so that's 25%. But it's not always achievable. If you're buying performers, it's really, the pricing is such that you can't really get that.
It shouldn't be more than on a performer, though. It shouldn't be 9 or 10 years. You still should be in 6 to 8 years before you get that back. So that's one thing that people got to be careful of, because I've seen people also talk about even on a non-performer, saying it's a $50,000 asset, I'm going to pay $35,000 for it, and then I'm going to get it reperforming and sell it for $40,000 in a year when it's only paying, again, $300 a month. When you do that math, it's, the return that someone would be buying it at is less than, 8-10%, which, is difficult to sell in that ballpark. So when there's low monthly payments, be careful.
Yeah, it's the issue is, we were taught at the beginning that if you get something reperforming, you can sell it for like 75, 85, 90% of UPB. But that was almost never true, because what buyers really look at is the yield. And so you have to pull out your financial calculators and figure out, to give somebody, they're going to want a minimum of a 12% yield usually particularly on a contract for deed. They might even want a 14% or even a little above that, because they're so unstable. And, it's logical to assume that you're not going to get, you're not going to have smooth sailing. There will be issues, and it may go non-performing, and you may have to take it back and all these things. So on a good quality note, people want at least 10 to 12% yield. On a CFD, I think they want 12 to 16 or more. Would you agree?
Yeah, but I've also seen that pendulum start to shift now, where on performing notes, I'm seeing a lot more that drop by about 2 points down to 8 to 10%. And on CFDs now, that's kind of floating right around 12. It used to be at 15. I've seen that come, everything's kind of made it shift downward because there's not as much product, and is the stock market not doing as well. It's much difficult in other markets to get 8, 10, 12%. So if you can't get it elsewhere, why are people going to offer it here? And I've started to see that shift.
Yeah, I'm getting a lot of people asking about asking to buy partials too. Did you see an uptick in the number of people who are asking about it?
Yep. And actually that kind of can roll into a question from Sylvia, who asked, can you do a partial on a CFD, and how does it work with the deed, and would you transfer the deed or park it in escrow? So, would you like to answer that, or?
Have we changed our view? Like, we don't transfer the property into people's. We don't transfer it to the partials person. But if you're going to have like your servicer manage the partial, like they are set up to do that, and it seems like their expectation is that you are transferring to the buyer. With a CFD, it's particularly difficult because you'd have to transfer the property itself to the partials buyer. It's not as big a deal with a regular note because you just have to do an assignment. But so I don't know if we're weirdos about this. Our take on partials is let's get the money in. Let's get the partials, the partials investor paid, and let's keep control of it in case anything goes awry. We're involved and can fix it. If we just turn the thing over to someone who isn't really a skilled, note investor, and something starts to go horribly awry, and they don't, we're not involved anymore, and we're not watching what's going on, it just seems like it's much more of a recipe for failure. But yeah, I've had people who are just very insistent that, they're not doing it unless I sign the thing over to them.
Yeah. And in that instance, you're really, you almost are like splitting it between a first and a second. And, but to answer that question, yeah, you hit the nail on the head. My agreement with and everybody's agreement is different, but I know the one Gail and I use is that it's just like a JV agreement. There's an agreement in place that it's a sale and collateral assignment over to you. Nothing gets recorded. It's just like a JV agreement doesn't get recorded. And my agreement basically states you're going to get, X amount of payments for X amount of months. And if the note goes in default at that point in time, then there's certain things that occur during that occurrence, and there's certain remedies within that. But typically on a CFD, on a partial or even on a note, I wouldn't be recording everything. And personally, I'm not sure you want to have your name recorded on a assignment for note, because let's look at it this way. Say Gail buys a partial note from me and records the assignment. And say the servicer does something wrong, or I do something wrong where I communicated with the borrower and told them to go, pound sand, or I was just abusive to them, or they thought the servicer was, and the payments weren't getting applied correctly. How many borrowers complain about that? They go hire some attorney down the street who works pro bono and gets paid based on what they collect, and then sues everyone. Well, guess who's getting sued? If you've got that assignment recorded as part of, ownership or partial ownership of the note, even though you're not managing it, even though you're not involved, guess what? You're still getting sued, and then even though you will probably, not, have to do anything, it's still the fact that you're going to have to hire an attorney. You're going to have to respond to the complaint, and you're going to have to drop a few $1,000. So
yeah, and actually they don't even have to name you in the suit. If they just name your servicer in the suit, the servicer is going to turn around and say, oh, okay, we're being sued on behalf of one of your borrowers. Like, you need to indemnify us and start paying the legal bills.
Yeah. If you can't trust your partner to the point of you need to have that document recorded, then, it might not be somebody
doing the deal anyway. Yeah.
Same thing with sellers. I mean, when I get a loan sale agreement from a certain seller now, I skim through it, but do I do a exact scan to make sure it's the same one every time?
Mm-hmm.
No, because, could he insert words and pull one over on somebody, on any of us? So, let's use, direct source. I mean, we all buy from them and it's the same agreement, one, from the other. John would never do that, never, and I'm not saying he would, but, if it's one of those things where it's a lot of relationship in this business as well, even though it is a business, in that aspect, I think you got to be very comfortable with your partner.
Yeah, it actually goes both ways, because when John Keith sends you a PDF of a contract, a sales contract, I always just turn it into a Word document, and so that I can paste my signature in without having to print the whole thing out. And I can very easily change the language. He's not looking either. You have to have that trust that we're all, looking out for each other. That's why I think you end up dealing with a fairly small number of people, because you can't really, your circle of trust can't be that big. It's just not possible.
Yeah. So Sylvia asked, follow up to that, couldn't it be looked at as doing fractional notes by not transferring or signing it? I mean, you could look at it as being a fractional. You could look at it as being a loan that is backed by the asset. I mean, you can look at it many different ways, because the way a lot of times I explain it to somebody is, it's essentially like you give me a loan because I'm paying you a consistent monthly payment of principal and interest for a set period of time based on a payment stream coming from that asset. If you thought about it as you being a bank on a rental property, and you lent me $20,000 on that rental property, I'm collecting rent in the door, but I'm paying you $300 a month, for that to pay down, to pay that partial down, or that payment stream. It's really the same thing. It's just a matter of kind of how you call it and how the agreement is structured from that standpoint.
Yep. Yeah, and of course, what people are super interested in is the paragraph that talks about what happens, in the event that the person stops paying.
Yep. And I actually had a 30-minute conversation about that this morning with our favorite attorney, and as part of, kind of doing some modifications to my partial agreement, because I brought up the question of, we're in control of this, and if it goes, delinquent and there's a partial and you have somebody acting and they're acting in a passive role, could that be considered a security?
Mm-hmm.
And I mean, which then gets into SEC issues. So what we wanted to make clear in my partial agreement is, if it goes in default, that partial buyer becomes an active participant in how we are going to work it out.
Right. So it probably bears repeating for people who haven't heard us talk about this before, but in a joint venture, one of the requirements is that you should be actively discussing your decisions with your joint venturer, and that's one of the things that keeps it from being a security.
Okay.
So Sylvia wants to know, why not just make it a loan to you? Wouldn't that be much cleaner? You could.
You could.
Yeah.
It's sometimes some individuals might not want it to be a loan. Yeah, it's like, I mean, at the end of the day, it's really, I'm not sure
what you call it.
Yeah, I'm not sure the legal ramifications of if it's a loan versus not. I mean, if it's a loan and it's the default, then, you know, with the partial, well, here's the reason why I think you might want to go with the partial is if I'm getting those payments from, and again, I'll use the example of this is a property I own and you were the lender on it. If I stop paying you, but I still got the payments, you're basically on this partial or on the loan, you're going to have to come after me. You don't, and the property may be backed as the asset, but then you're going to have to go after the property in that sense, and then try and collect. Where if you're on the partial and I started to default, I think it's a cleaner path to you to get the property versus it being a private loan with the property backed as the asset. It gets really technical in legalese. SEC, not FCC, just wanted to clarify, the Securities Exchange Commission. Okay, what other questions do we have from people? One question said, does John let you know if your bids weren't accepted? Yeah, typically, but you sometimes just gotta remind him, just saying, hey, do you have an update? But it sounds like nobody's gotten any response from him on that last round. So I'm guessing in that sense, it's the seller. Yeah, mm-hmm. Because John.
Yeah, John's a man of action.
Yeah, because he only gets paid when he sells, I believe. So he's not going to sit on him for a while.
Probably, you know, he's screaming at them to get back to everyone.
Let's see. Last session there was discussion about getting realtors do BPOs. Where do you folks get before bid BPO and during due diligence? So I think, Gail, I'll let you answer this one, but there's a difference between a pre-bid and a post-bid, and I'll let you kind of explain what you should be doing and when you should spend money.
Yeah, so when you start to buy a lot and to bid a lot, and you really start to understand how important it is to conserve your funds. And I certainly, like everyone else at the beginning, you know, as soon as I got an accepted, or as soon as I saw an asset I liked, I would order a BPO. We don't do that. When we see, well, Chris and I did a whole podcast about how we handle a tape. Like, what do we do when we get it? And the main thing we do is try not to spend any money until we're really sure we're extremely interested. So we would send someone from Craigslist, usually, really, just a warm body, someone who can drive by the property to make sure it's, first of all, still standing. That's surprisingly common. That Chris has even posted pictures of houses that sounded great on paper, but had like no windows, no doors, sometimes no roof. Yeah, open concept. So yeah, it's very important to have someone drive by. You can usually find someone for $25, depending on how remote the area is. If it's in a city where there's lots of people, you can get it for $25. Just have someone go over, check out the neighborhood, check out the house, take some pictures, and yeah. So if that looks decent and the other things that you're looking at, like back taxes, you know, crime in the neighborhood. You want to look at an aerial view to see if there's a toxic waste dump in the backyard. You just like look at commonsensical things, along with, I mean, we do that before we even bid most of the time, because you have to know if there are going to be features that will lower your bid before you make the bid. Because although people talk about fading bids, in reality, no one in the world wants to be offered an amount of money and then have you come back, even for very legitimate reasons, and say, you know what, I'm not offering you that anymore. I'm offering you a lot less than that. So it just doesn't work well. It's not a good ploy. So yeah, we find out as much as we can before bid. We have someone look eyes on the property. Once you have an accepted bid, that's when you would get a formal BPO from a realtor or from a BPO company. Chris loves data tree.
Whatever.
Yeah,
You want to call
yeah. Potato. Yeah, so do you use them for BPOs, or I know you do the AVMs, is that what they're called?
Yeah, I'll use them for AVMs, especially on CFDs. On CFDs, I'm very careful in regards to making sure I don't order a BPO and O&E at the same time, because sometimes an O&E, you know, like you said, the Craigslist person or something, because if the house looks decent, then I'll order the O&E first to make sure that's clean, because there's also a lot of times when you'll get these O&E reports and that company or that entity might have $50,000 worth of fines in there.
Yeah, particularly in places like, I don't know if it's just Indiana or a lot of other places, but there are places where the company that you buy from, like we all have bought CFDs from Harbor and also Window Rock, which is the parent company of Home Opportunity and Flatiron Holdings and all those guys. And a lot of those companies in Indiana, after a lien has been on a house for a certain amount of time, it turns into a legal judgment. These are code enforcement liens, municipal liens will automatically become judgments. And once they become judgments, they attach to every property owned by that. You should see the visuals you're creating here, Chris. That looks like a monster of some sort.
Sorry, my computer was about to die.
Yeah, I see. So once a lien becomes a judgment, it attaches to every property owned by that company. So I personally own a property in Gary, Indiana that has $20,000 in judgments on it that are from the city of Hammond, which isn't even the same place. But, you know, that's what they do because it's there. So in case that property ever sells, like your mortgage will get paid first, but then any other mortgage, I mean, those judgments will get paid after you. So.
Yeah, like Home Opportunity in Cincinnati has $50-something thousand in fines, and I was looking at an asset there as a CFD, and basically it was like, oh, throw this one out because of just all the fines. And if you were trying to take that property back and then again turn around and do anything with it, the fines are would attach to the property, especially on the non-performers, because you really won't be able to liquidate it.
Yes.
Let's see, what other questions do we have?
So what are the biggest differences between due diligence for performers and non-performers?
I do the same.
Chris.
I treat them the same. I treat them the same. I'll still.
Every performer can become a non-performer at any moment.
Yeah, no, I treat them. I treat them the same. I look at, what's the property worth? How long have they been paying? What's the, what are the numbers? What's the current UPB? What's the current interest rate? How long have the borrowers been in the property? Run the O&E report. I treat them really the same. I mean, the way, the bid and my calculator might calculate the bids differently, but the due diligence, I do them same.
Yes. How happy would you be to get the property back? This has become the compelling question to me because I just today was talking, I have like multiple code enforcement violations on a property in Georgia. And this property, like the forfeiture has dragged on and on and on in Georgia, of all places, partially due to attorney incompetence. Attorney incompetence so bad that they admitted it themselves and paid a penalty. They forfeited like half their fee, which allowed me to pay the taxes, which was nice. But yeah, I mean, the place is falling apart and it's just getting worse and worse. And I don't know, by the time we get this place, I don't even know. I mean, I can't complain now that Chad has told his very sad story, but thank you, Chad. You did make me feel better, if nothing else.
So, yes. Let's see. And what other questions? People just mentioning about Cuyahoga County and other things as well. Did you say what to do? Oh, question was, did I decide?
Yeah,
So here's one I have that I'll throw out there, and I posted this on Facebook, and I'm curious what people's opinions are on this. So have an asset that, say I paid $1,000 for this thing. It's a CFD up in Michigan that the property is going to tax sale the end of next month and needs about there's $6,000 in taxes due, but $3,000 to avoid the sale. And, the BPO came back at roughly about 50 grand, but, I discounted, say maybe 30,000. So the question I pose to people is, should I pay the taxes, and try and get the borrower on a workout, which a borrower's like, I can give you $1,000, but not till April. Meanwhile, the borrower hasn't paid in over a year. So one of the things I was thinking was, okay, I'm going to go pay $2,000 possibly for taxes, then drop another, call it $2,000 for the forfeiture, and wait for that process, and then take the property back, and then have to pay the other $3,000 in taxes. So I'm in it for now $8,000 plus the $1,000 I acquired it. I'm in it for $9,000, and then evict a woman because she's probably not going to leave. So there's another $1,000. There's $10,000, and maybe take 6 months for this process, and then maybe have $30,000 property. That best case get somewhere from that. Or do I say, I'm in this thing for $1,000? Do I do nothing? Let it go to tax sale, bid $7,000 at tax sale, which is the taxes plus my $1,000. Everything above that would then be my profit, because the first $6,000 would go to taxes, $1,000 comes to me, and then everything above it. So if somebody bids $10,000 at the tax sale, my $1,000 turns into $4,000 in the span of a month. So I was trying to throw that out there as an option.
Are you going to bid on it at the tax sale so that someone else will bid higher, or what is? Or you don't care if
Here's the other thing: if I bid at the tax sale and I get it at tax sale, then the land contract is already forfeited, and I don't have to. Yeah, because I don't have to go through the forfeiture process. Like if you bid at tax sale, you would take deed to the property. The borrower's defaulted. That agreement's gone.
Interesting, because we have in Pennsylvania we have a couple different kinds of tax sales. We have upset sales where the taxes have to be paid.
Yep.
The minimum bid is the amount of taxes due, but all the other liens stay on the property. And then we have judicial sales where everything's wiped, except for the taxes. You can buy it for just the taxes. But so you've done the research on what kind of tax sale this is? It's not an upset sale, right?
It's not an upset sale. It's you buy it, and if nobody bids, then it goes back to the county and it goes into their land bank. So that's why I'd want to bid above, the tax rate plus my bid. So worst case is I get the property back. I'm going to have to pay the taxes anyways, but then, it would, I could bid in a different entity, take it, then I don't have to go through the forfeiture process. I would just go through the eviction process.
Yeah, I didn't realize that would cancel the land contract.
Yeah.
Because why does that cancel the land contract? That's not in the land contract, is it? That if it goes to tax.
They're in default and the property's been sold. So it's my understanding, and I got to confirm this again with the attorney. He's told me it does. Yeah.
I mean, it sounds right in theory, but every one of these land contracts says if they miss a payment, they're now tenants and they're paying rent. But, I've never had an attorney say to me, oh, you're fine. It says that. So they're tenants, just evict them. They don't say that.
I've had one tell me that, and it was actually in Pennsylvania. In Pennsylvania, the attorney.
I want the name of this attorney.
Who is my Pennsylvania attorney? Hold on, I will tell you who it is.
Okay.
Give me 1 second.
It happens at my
I know it's Jillian. Oh, Tucker Aaronsburg.
Oh.
So Jillian Snyder, who I use from there, who's been great to work with, dealing with a BK case, because in Pennsylvania, what's a little different, jumping off topic here, but in Pennsylvania, on a bankruptcy, there's like a formal process where there's like a mediation to try and do a loan mod. So I have a property in Pennsylvania where the borrower went into bankruptcy, the payoff was here, and the arrearages were up here. And, we worked, instead of having them spread it out over 60 months, we came to an agreement somewhere down here on a new loan mod, which was a win-win situation for both parties. So we actually just filed that with the courts recently to try and get that approved. And we'll end up saving the borrower roughly, about $800 a month in payments. But also, I'd say for me, I'm perfectly fine with that. So
that's something that'll get paid by the trustee in the bankruptcy?
They'll pay the trustee. The trustee will cut me the check every month. And, so far, if that happens, I will be very happy. So.
Alrighty. Well, it is after 9:30. Are we, is everyone winding down?
Yep, winding down. I think, do you have any last second pearls of wisdom as part of our notes and bolts segment?
No, absolutely not. But I do want to say to everyone, please go to gooddeedsnoteinvesting.com and sign up for our mailing list. We are getting active about putting out tapes, and that's our preferred list. So you guys who are with us regularly or even occasionally, we want you to have the first look at anything we put out.
So yes, please. And if you enjoy these episodes, if you could also go to iTunes, leave us a review. Casey, thank you very much. I saw yours. And while you're doing that, you can always do copy paste and put it on Stitcher as well. So getting greedy, asking for 2, not 1.
Oh, wait, someone's going to Scott's lunch and learn next week and wants to know any good zinger questions to ask him.
I didn't know Scott had a lunch and learn.
Really? Well, I guess our invitation got lost in the mail.
Yes. Any good zingers? Ooh.
It's in Orlando, huh?
Okay.
Well, that's interesting because we're going to interview Scott, and he's like the hardest person in the world to think, like, what is it that we don't know about him? The man is on video every day, Facebook living and everything else. Like, it's funny because he talks a lot, but we don't really know that much about him personally. Maybe we should just make it intensely personal.
Yeah. Well, the other thing, I know he interviewed on 7 different podcasts today because he's out in, I think, San Diego at a podcast event out there. And
most of those people don't know who he is, though. They're just like, so what do you do again?
Yeah, I can't think of any good zinger questions to ask him because, there's not really any zingers because he'll be able to answer it. But one other question just did come through, Gail, about your answering BPO questions. You mentioned liens on properties, and if you discover those from an O&E report.
Are judgments or liens?
Either one.
Yeah. Mostly the things that don't show up on title reports are current, like delinquent, like sewer bills, electric bills that haven't turned into liens yet. Those are the things you have to worry about. Those are the sneaky silent killers. You can also see no taxes due both on a title report and on a website. And sometimes that means that there are many places where properties go to tax sale and a buyer will pay the taxes and then it will appear that there are no taxes due, but there actually could be a lot of taxes due. Could be in like a redemption situation. So when you get serious about a property, you're completing your due diligence and you have the title report, you still need to call the utilities and the city and county about taxes and sewer and whoever you get on the phone, just say like, what else could there be that isn't going to show up on a title report? Yeah. And people are generally pretty helpful, I find, particularly in the Midwest and the South. They're really nice. I had a woman call me from Bamberg County, South Carolina. You know who that is, because the borrower came in to pay the taxes, which are like $200, which like an idiot I had paid already because we haven't been able to reach this woman at all, and I just didn't want to have to worry about it. And
so you didn't
she was so excited.
Your partner to pay if you were paying the taxes or not. Thanks, Gail.
Yeah. Well, I think I'm allowed to spend a certain amount without asking you. Yeah, so she's like surprised and delighted to find out her taxes were paid already, but I told her, well, now she's going to have to pay us back. But yeah, this county woman actually called me on her behalf to find out if like there's any way for us to put the property back in her name so she can get a homestead exemption. I thought like, wow.
Yeah, tell her to pay.
Yeah, exactly. I'm moving to Bamberg, South Carolina. And then she was like, oh yeah, this is a borrower that called me also from South Carolina. And she's like, yeah, I know the tax people will work with me because I saw the lady in the grocery store and we were talking about it. To that boy, small town life in the South. It's beautiful.
Okay, well, wanna again thank you all for joining us this evening. Gail, any last second thoughts before we sign off?
Yes, Casey Lang, you do the pro title report. That's the full foreclosure report. Yes.
I thought it was 135 though, not 185.
It varies. It's like 149-ish seems to be most of the ones that I buy. But yeah, they are more expensive in some places. So no, it's been lovely visiting with everyone. I hope everyone's not going to be shy now that you know that when you raise your hand, you're on the show.
For those of you who were out there talking about trying to do more marketing, again, we are getting about 1,000 listens per week on the podcast. So in each episode is getting about 400 to 500. So it's,
yes. Think of a question.
Yes.
Come on.
Come on. So, well,
awesome.
Okay. Well, thank you all for joining us this evening and go out and do some good deeds. Thank you.
Night.